welcome to the Monopath podcast. I'm joined today by Richard Swift, who is one of the tutors at Wakefield College, as well as being a recognisable face from the Wakefield music scene, at least, for a number of years. He's been referred to in some of the earlier podcasts. In particular, I spoke to Ben Brentnell from The Turning Tides. So if you'd like some context for this episode, I suggest you listen to that first. Although that's by no means a requirement. I think as a standalone podcast, this works absolutely fine. We cover music taste and how to develop one's own taste in music, as well as talking about the value of it, to what degree it is genetic and to what degree it can be cultivated, the role of education in music, and the psychological shape of a good musician. Anyway, before I introduce you to the conversation, let's just do the obligatory statement about the lack of advertising and what I would hope people do if they want to support the podcast. The easiest way to do that, if you are enjoying, if you're getting value out of these conversations, is to either buy some tea from Arthur Dove Tea Co. That goes directly to me and helps the tea company grow, but it also helps motivate me to continue doing this and to know that others are out there. In the same way, iTunes reviews, really helpful way of me just kind of keeping on the right page and knowing that I'm saying the things you want to hear and having conversations that mean something to others. Regardless of that, I'll continue to do them anyway. I do get something out of this. But as we mentioned in the podcast, feedback being a fairly critical part of the creative process, so it would help. In any case, I'll leave it right there. Without further ado, I'll bring you Richard Swift. Rich, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Darren, how's things?
Things are fantastic, actually.
Good.
You've been on my list of wants to speak to, and I pestered you before, and it's taken us a little while to get to here, but thank you for finally giving in to my incessant demands.
Yeah, I'll say it's my pleasure now, although at the end of this, what we make of it, but yeah. No.
Yeah, we'll determine that at the end. We'll do a checkout towards the end of it as well. Okay, so my first question, really, I guess I never really dive into big. I hope to not dive into too heavy questions, but it's more to just do with your taste in music. What sort of music gets you up in the morning?
Oh mate, it's so interchangeable. At the minute, I'm trying to think of the last couple of things I listened to. I've been going through a big Billie Eilish phase for the last year or so.
Nice.
And that's kind of my bag at the minute, but that's not just musically, but that's more from the songwriting perspective as well, which we might talk about in a little bit. I'm still a big metalhead. I still that music still filters into my day-to-day goings pretty much all the time. So Metallica have just brought a new album out. I've rediscovered Bring Me the Horizon, so I've been digging on them for quite some time now. But it just changes so rapidly, which is probably why I find myself in the position I do these days with bands and music in general, that I'm just never satisfied. So there's always got to be something else. So
that's partly the reason I ask, is because you seem to have quite a broad range of projects that you're doing and different kinds of music that you're juggling all the time. What do you think is there a through line between that connects Billie Eilish to Bring Me the Horizon? Like, what's the pattern there that's like, these are the things that I'm picking up on?
I've never really thought about it. I don't think there is a pattern. I'm just drawn to music that in my eyes is good. So I'm not much of a lyricist. I don't tend to go from overly, wordplay music. I don't necessarily listen to that. I like good beats. I like good songs. I like good melody, and I like good chords and choruses. And so it doesn't really matter who it is, as long as the music strikes a chord. as long as the music finds its way into my head, or I find myself humming something, then it doesn't matter. It could be absolutely anything. I don't know if you're familiar with the song WAP at the minute. That's a big thing.
No, I'm not.
Well,
out of touch.
It's a Cardi B song. It's causing a stir at the minute because it's quite lyrically. It's quite offensive, and well, not offensive. It talks about a lot of.
Is it like taboo?
Yeah, it's a lot of sexual imagery and all this kind of stuff. And I'll listen to it just for a laugh, but I can't get it out of my head at the minute. So I've been kind of cheeky listening to it every now and then. So yeah, I could kind of hold my hands up and say I'm a fan of at least one Cardi B song as well. So,
what did you think of the Billie Eilish Bond song?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to tick all the boxes when it comes to a Bond song. So she did really well to make it sound like her, but also it has to sound like a Bond song. You'll know, as we went to the same college, that we did a Bond writing, assignment. So I find it hard to enjoy that music now because I'm so analytical with it. I'm like, oh, there's that augmented note, there's that chromatic step. So yeah, it's difficult to enjoy, but I think she did a really good job. Everyone's talking about, could she hit this big belt note, which she did. And obviously Hans Zimmer on the track, which never go wrong with Hans.
Oh, I hadn't known there was a connection with Hans there as well. That's nice. It probably explains a lot for me. I always like what he does. It's a bit crazy, and I think that's what I like about it. It's unpredictable. It's like a mad scientist doing it. The Billie Eilish Bond song, I enjoyed all of it up until the very last chord. Hated that last chord.
But again, that's kind of the box tick. You've got to have that chord in a Bond song.
No, I hated it. I couldn't get. I guess I like you in that way. I don't care too much. I suppose it's like an honor to tradition, and I get that. But for me, I'm taking every song on a per song basis, and I guess I don't really mind about the tradition too much when it comes to art. It doesn't seem. It seems like that can get in the way of a good song, whereas it doesn't do anything for it. In terms of the song itself, like it might do something culturally that's nice, but it's not done anything for the song itself. So I just when I heard the song, I was like, this is all great, loving it. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, they'll have to go to YouTube or Spotify or wherever they find music and listen to it. But there is that classic Bond chord right at the end of the song after everything else has happened, and for all intents, the song has ended. And there's just a striking, unusual, out of nowhere moment that it kind of interrupted the flow of things for me.
Yeah, it's just it's a flourish that doesn't need to be there, but it ties it in. And I guess when you have a franchise such as Bond, we as musicians can sit here and analyze a song, but my friends and family who are just going to go watch a Bond film just want it to sound like a Bond song. It's the tradition that's been happening every couple of years since a Bond song's been released. And my only issue, not my only issue, but my only thing would be the Sam Smith, Adele, and Billie Eilish were just a bit too similar. But I was a big fan when Chris Cornell did his, and it just changed, not the mold because the mold's set, but he was able to have a bit more artistic freedom with it, and all the rest have just been that kind of slow pop number. It is what it is.
I completely agree. I thought he knocked it out of the park, really. That tune. That's one of my favourite ones. And Garbage, The World Is Not Enough, that's one of the other ones that I get a lot from. I guess like you as well there, I don't really know what it is about those particular songs that really just does it for me. I mean, I think it's got to be something to do with it feels novel enough, like there's something new in there that I couldn't have predicted or guessed or done myself, but something familiar enough that I kind of get that sense of nostalgia.
Yeah, of course.
And it's like it's got a good balance of those things, whereas these ones, like the Sam Smith one, is a good example of one that just feels a bit like all of those things that I treasure are stripped from it, like all of the traditions there more as like a nod or for tradition's sake. It doesn't feel like it's doing it because it loves the tradition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't get along with it when I first heard it, and I make a conscious effort to never use the word hate when I describe music. I either don't understand it or it's just not written for me. So when I heard that, I'm like, I'm not a Sam Smith fan per se. I've heard a couple of his songs in the charts, but I think he's got a great voice, unique voice. But I heard that and I'm like, no, it's a Bond song, but apart from that, I don't have that personal connection. But I'll tell you, it's been a grower. I have listened to it, not super recently, but I have listened to it since and been like, oh, okay, I kind of, I've found a lot of love for it now, where before I just wrote it off as this is just not, it's just not good enough for a Bond song for me. But it's
Yeah, I think it's just because I like his voice. Like, if I focused on that, I could just go, his voice sounds nice. And if I focused on that separately from the song, it was kind of like better. Like, and if I just focused on the song itself and forgot that it was Sam Smith doing it in a way, like if I'm just being almost analytical and saying, yeah, as a song, like in structure and those sorts of things, like it kind of works. But it's when those things are coming together, there's some kind of jarring that just didn't, like a jarring in terms of like meaning though, rather than anything to do with the sound of it. It was just like, there's like, Sam Smith just didn't get what a Bond song was meant to be, so it just felt like he was doing a Sam Smith song with the backdrop of a Bond song, and it kind of just made no sense.
possibly, yeah. I guess again, I'm not familiar with his music, but I guess from the Adele perspective, her normal music would have fit well with a Bond song because you've got that '60s inspired sound that she could fall back on. Chris Cornell a bit different because he'd not really had a rocky number for a while. I don't think Live and Let Die, I guess, but I wouldn't necessarily call that rocky like Chris Cornell was rocky. And again, Billie Eilish's type of music fit quite well with the Bond-esque thing. But, new Bond coming up soon, probably a new sound that will follow on with it, as it did with Chris Cornell. It updated because Daniel Craig got involved, and we said bye to the 90s and the garbage era and GoldenEye, who had that Tina Turner. So it's a new art.
That was a good one as well. That was a good one too.
Great song.
Okay, so I started with taste because I just really wanted to kind of I wanted to illustrate to listeners like there's quite a broad appreciation of it there. And so you work in music as well. Do you think that follows from having a broad appreciation of that art form?
Definitely. There's a lot of things that I would consider people are better than me at being a teacher or a musician or whatever else. One of the things I would, fight my corner with is saying that my taste is not better than anyone else's, not necessarily more diverse than anybody else's, but I have a very diverse taste in music because I honestly don't care about the superficial aspect of it. I don't look at what bands look like as such. I don't care what genre it's from. I don't go for tags. If I hear a song and I like it, it's good enough to be playlisted, or it's good enough to find its way in to my general, music listening experience. So again, all came from parents really and upbringing. I was quite fortunate to have. As a family, my music don't play instruments. We're not a musical family. I think I'm probably the only person in my extended family that actually is anything related to music. But Dad, a big Elvis, Johnny Cash, Conway Twitty fan, that old rock and roll 60s stuff. Mum was big into Rod Stewart, Gilbert O'Sullivan, Stevie Wonder. I used to remember raiding through a vinyl, finding like Erasure vinyls and Bryan Adams, and so quite eclectic. And then my sister would be bashing out Take That and Boyzone and everything else. And as a 8-9-year-old kid, as we mostly are at that age, I was listening to a lot of chart music, and chart music in the mid to late 90s was a lot of Euro dance and trance, and then the cheesy, bubblegum pop stuff. So, and I never dismissed any of it. Like, oh, this is brilliant. Whether it's an Out Here Brothers song, or whether it's a Stevie Wonder song, or something from Johnny Cash or Roy Orbison, and then found Michael Jackson, and it all kind of changed from there. That was like my music. No one else in the family, in my household, really listened to Michael Jackson. And so that was mine. That was my thing. That's where I found a lot of my identity, in that kind of music. Still do. Still love it.
I think a lot of people would be surprised if they know you as well, because maybe surprised to some degree, but most people know you for your beard,
Yep.
your very lengthy beard, and assume there's a correlation between one's beard and the music that they listen to. So you'd just be the guy who has the beard who listens to metal music, and it ends there.
There's a lot of that involved again, but metal was one of the last genres of music I actually found. But again, being 13, 14 when I found it, and everybody's striving for individuality and everyone's wanting that rebellious nature. I was never a rebellious kid. I was never a naughty kid or anything, but I wanted something that was mine. I wanted something that was a little bit dangerous. So Michael Jackson led me to Slash, because Slash played on a few Michael Jackson tracks on the Bad and Dangerous, Dangerous album. Slash led me to Guns N' Roses. Slash stood on top of a piano and played the solo to November Rain. That's it, It's almost been a blank. Just my eyes have just gone kind of blank since then. That's everything's just been a blur, is what I'm trying to say. So seeing Slash play a guitar solo on top of a piano, and then that way I was like, right, I'm being a musician. Simple as. There's no looking back. It was either that or a magician, and I'm not a very good magician, so.
Yet.
Well, there's still time. You could probably.
Yeah, there's still.
On the camera, I've got about 18 packs of card decks behind there, so still trying to get there.
That's definitely more of a serious yet than I had intended it to be. Then.
Oh no, I still do it every now and then.
Nice. I was going to ask before we got all into that, you answered the question anyway, is whether you could teach taste in music or whether it was just something that was already there and you just kind of find it at some point. Don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
I think you can teach taste. I even just one of the things I teach is listening to music, so it's all about aural perception and trying to hear, just like mainly analyzing music from a theoretical point of view, so hearing chords and hearing instrumentation and stuff. But I also just make sure that I play as much as possible, and I've played like some hard techno to the students who've never really heard it before, or written it off as this is just that chart music that degenerates listen to or whatever, and they've actually got something for it. And then I've played metal to kids who don't like metal, and I've played folk and country and pop and punk to people who don't necessarily have a way into that or haven't just experienced it. Even though kids are walking around with Spotify and iTunes and YouTube, myself included, we still tend to go for the same thing. We still listen to the same thing. It's just now on digital form where it was on CD or vinyl or tape. So I don't know if a lot of the youth actually discover music at the rate that we used to when we were kids. And that's even before MySpace and stuff. That's just recommendations from friends. Anything a friend told me, I trusted that. So if a friend said you need to pick up the new Nine Inch Nails album, fine. No questions asked. And I might like it, I might not, but that was a risk I was going to take. And then you just trade your CD off to someone else. And again, it's funny, and I don't mean to ramble on, but it's funny having the last couple of podcasts with having Ben from Turning Tides ad from Diamond and Dusters.
That's the one, yeah.
And then Eddie Kaboom last week. All three of them have pretty much introduced me to new music. Some of them a lot, like Ben. Ben's not a metalhead, so a lot of the music that came from Ben was bluesy country stuff. We bonded over quite disgusting slow metal, really sludgy, doomy stuff. And then Eddie, Eddie's probably one of the most musically eclectic people I know. Even more than me. Like you go around his house, it's blues, it's hip hop, it's R&B, it's reggae, and then he's got the metal stuff on the side. So nice little link there, I think.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about with the taste of music and being able to teach it and stuff. I wondered if there was a comparison. I think there probably is. I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing here. It's like, when you go on, if you go on YouTube, they have the algorithms on YouTube set up a certain way to make you stay on YouTube. And it means that if you watch a video, there's another one in the queue for the next video that's a little more extreme than the last one, but only a little bit. And it's, if you watch one video and you chart the course from that very first one about kittens, 100 videos down the line, if you just follow watch next or the recommended suggestions, you can end up being on, killing kittens or something ridiculous like that. It can get quite extreme because that's just the way the algorithm is tailored. I wonder if there's something similar in music tastes that's not digitally designed by anybody. It's just a fact of nature that we're already attuned to thinking that way. So when you think about, say, your taste of music, starting off with something a little softer, more generally listenable, a little less exclusive, and gradually looking for something a little bit more edgier and something that's got a little bit more kick, and getting you from being young and listening to kind of like the soul records and the pop records that you might have listened to, and working your way through to metal, is that kind of that same progression from something more appealing to the common to something a little more appealing to uniqueness. Does that make sense?
It does, and like you said, YouTube and YouTube algorithms are pretty much based around that. I don't necessarily know if there's a human element, but one of the things I always found is you have to understand a person to then look at recommending something new. So again, there's that trust element I mentioned. I will always trust a recommendation from someone who has either led me right in the past, even with like a Netflix TV show. If someone's mentioned that to watch one show and I do and I like it, then if they mention another one that's like, well, they kind of get where I am. They understand my taste. They understand what I'm looking for, my sense of humor, blah, blah, blah. So I think, I mean, with music, there is a link, but I do think it's something that possibly only people who understand, either have been down a similar path as you musically or understand what you're looking for. So if a guitarist is only obsessed with Oasis and then you show that guitarist Jimi Hendrix, there's the link straight away. It's like, well, that's an amazing guitar player. Take the songwriting out, take the style of music out. If you want to see a really good guitar player, go check out him, or go check out Slash, or go check out somebody else, So I think the link is in that, and that's how a lot of my music taste was found, through just that guy's a great guitar player, that guy's a great guitar player. Because that's what I wanted to be before anything else was a guitarist. So I linked all my music through guitaring. So whether it was, again, Michael Jackson, Steve Stevens, who played on Bad, who was Billy Idol's guitarist, into Slash, Bryan Adams, Keith Scott, I think is his guitar player, amazing guitarist. Even Johnny Cash, he wasn't an incredible guitarist, but the Tennessee Three, Luther, can't remember the guitarist's name, Luther something, amazing guitar player. So that's how I found my link, and that's how music taste changed for me. A human algorithm, I don't know. I'm just waffling now, but I think taste can only be developed by someone who maybe can steer you right and understands maybe even what you're looking for as well.
Yeah, I guess there's two things that we're kind of talking about at the same time. I think the algorithm thing is possibly helpful, possibly confusing, uncertain yet to be determined. The two things that are like for me is, on the one hand, kind of what I'm trying to understand is to what degree is a taste in music just pre-wired in you, and so it's already kind of there. And if you've already got this genetic algorithm to look at the world a certain way and always be chasing this thing of extra edge, an escalation, I suppose, to something more edgy, which is what happened to me, by the way, as well. I started off young. The first single I bought was Say You'll Be There by the Spice Girls. And the first album I bought was Jamiroquai, Traveling Without Moving, which I thought was quite cool, actually, looking back. I looked out with that one. But then as I got older, when I was in my teens, like 15, 16, maybe a little older, just noisy metal music. I think there was kind of pop punk on the way to it, but noisy metal music, and you can kind of see that progression of like noisiness and extreme. And I just wondered if is that in parallel to something that was just already there in me, like that's and on others, which is like a natural, it's growing pains. When you're a teenager, especially, you get more hormonal, more angsty. Is it just natural that you would be looking for music that reflected that?
I think, I do think that's natural, and a lot of the friends I keep and stuff and have for years have definitely followed a similar trajectory with music than me. Mainly down the whatever you listen to as kids, but found rock and metal. So then that's kind of what we all bonded over. But equally, I've got a lot of friends that just don't like it. But you can play a song, and this is one of the things I kind of figured out last year when playing music to the students. Didn't know what it was, but it's like, oh, that's off American Pie, isn't it? Oh, that's off Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and stuff. So even their way into certain music was discovering it again, before things like MySpace and Spotify, a lot of the ways into discovering music was through video games. There's a video game on PlayStation 1 or 2 called Twisted Metal, which is like a racing game, and that had a load of like hard rock tunes on it. And again, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I think I had something on in the car, and they knew it. And I'm like, "You don't know this. You're not a metal fan at all. There's no way you would naturally progress to this. It's not your scene. It's not your upbringing." And it was because of that game. So again, if they've got an in that way, and like, "Oh, I like that one song by whoever it was, Anthrax or somebody," it's like, "Oh, here's another one, and here's another one," and then you can feed that taste. Then you can kind of make it expand, or at least encourage it to grow. So yeah, okay.
Well, I'd said that there was two things that we were kind of talking about. So one of them was what we just mentioned. Then it was kind of something to do with like the biology and like the predestiny of your music taste. The other one is what you were talking about, which is recommendations and kind of natural recommendations. Do you think that because we've almost outsourced some of those things to actual algorithms on things like Spotify, and we get our music recommendations from there instead of our friends, do you think we're losing some kind of, I mean, maybe this is a loaded question, but do you think that there's some loss of appreciation or loss of value for the music itself?
Possibly. I'm very conscious that I think about musically different than someone who doesn't do it as a job, or even necessarily doesn't do it as a hobby, just general Joe public. So potentially, I don't know if I'm equipped enough to kind of answer it, but I don't.
I suppose I could ask a slightly different question, which is the same but just in different clothes, it's dressed up differently. Which is, I'm interested in what you were saying about with recommendations from friends about music and how they might know you. I'm sure I'd seen this somewhere online at some point in the past, and I don't remember who was involved in it at all, but there was almost a competition between regular radio DJs and who were known for recommending music to people en masse, and digital algorithms, and they had a competition between those two things to see who could give the best recommendation to a third party. I can't remember. I don't recall who won that, but I think the digital algorithm was close. It wasn't a million miles off, but like I think they each predicted something that the third party actually liked. I haven't had anybody recommend music to me explicitly for a very long time. I think all I see is maybe somebody share something on social media and saying, "I listened to this." But that doesn't seem to happen all that often. And I guess I'm largely conscious about a disappreciation of the arts anyway. So that's kind of colouring what I'm getting at here. I don't know if you notice that sort of thing too, like a kind of almost turning your nose at what the arts are.
Yeah, I mean, just talk about the recommendations for a second. Again, it's hard for me to think outside of my own little bubble because, again, I teach music, so therefore I'm surrounded by a lot of people that listen to music. So recommending an album to someone is almost a weekly thing, or a new artist, and again, teach it every year. I will teach 16 through 18-year-olds, and every year I get older, but they always stay 16 to 18 because I get a new cohort of students in every year, and they come up with different things and different influences. And so I'm always being recommended music, and I always recommend music. And again, even like you said, even the online thing of someone just posting a link, if it's someone I know and someone I trust, then I will follow it and I will let myself go down that rabbit hole. And or if I listen to a podcast by an artist, and through quarantine, a lot of people have been turning to podcasts, which is brilliant. So hearing an artist talk a bit more candidly about an influence, or I heard this the other day, check it out, I'm like, right, I'm going to go find it. Outside of my little bubble, yeah, I do think probably there is it is dwindling, and people are depreciating music, but again, I don't see it on a day-to-day basis because the bubble I'm in is just, it all revolves around music. So but yeah, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what's in the top 40 charts at the minute, so I don't even know how that influencing what people listen to, and things like Fortnite, and again, there's music concerts on there. So I don't know how the youth are being not just fed, but also how they're discovering their own music. Probably coming from, there's a lot more students now and a lot more 16-year-olds that are more like, oh yeah, my dad introduced me to this, and it's no longer that rebelling against your parents. It seems it's more like, oh yeah, my dad's a big classic rock fan, so they're coming to college at 16 and they love Chicago and Iron Maiden and all these 60s, 70s bands. Like, okay, cool. I didn't expect that at all.
No. Well, I mean, the value thing is just interesting to me. I guess a good question then for you would be, what is the point? Like, what's the value in music, or what's the value in going into being educated and getting a degree in music?
I mean, selfishly for me, it was just always something that made me feel better, made me feel good at something, like I'd accomplished or I could accomplish something else. And that's kind of why I got into it. I'm not saying anything bad against my early college tutors when I was at college, but I definitely found out that being 16, 17 and wanting to be a rock star, just when you get to like 19 and 20, it's like, yeah, that's just not going to happen anymore, or it's not going to happen the way it was. So throw yourself more into other things, like doing different bands and different projects. Throw yourself into doing more recording and recording your own music and your own songs, and just it's difficult because although it is my profession, it's also my passion project, and it is the thing I do the most. I play a bit of video games, I watch a few films, but like this morning, for example, I got up and I've done about 4 hours of music in the studio before sitting here and talking to you, and I will continue to do a couple of hours after we finish this conversation as well. Anyone else getting into it? I mean, the one thing I always say is there's no guarantee of jobs in anything you do, so you might as well just do something you love. And if that pays off in the end, brilliant. And if it doesn't, well, you can say that you met some great people and you learned some new skills. And I know for a fact I would be happy as hell working in Morrison's 6 days, 7 days a week, but then coming home and making music. I'd be just as happy as long as it was part of what I did every day. Play with other people or write my own stuff or just discover new music. So don't know if that's what you asked, but you got your time.
Well, more or less. I mean, I feel largely the same about it. When I've gone into, before I went into music college, I think I was probably about 20 when I went back to college to do that. Something like that. When I went back to music college, I had a very similar college to when a very similar conversation to the one I had when I recently returned to do my master's in philosophy with my parents, which was, why are you doing that? What do you want out of it? What are you doing that for? What are you? Is there a job that you're looking for? And that was never the goal. It just simply felt right, and that was good enough for me. It just felt like that was the right thing to do for me right now, and so I just kind of followed that instinct. It just never seemed like knowing exactly what I was going to get out of it was kind of not the point. Like looking for a point was not the point. It was just something. I mean, maybe this resonates with people, maybe not, but it just seemed like it was the thing I had to do.
Yeah, same compulsion on my end. Again, there was just never a thought of anything else, and thankfully, really supportive parents would let me, kick the hell out of my drum kit all hours of the day, and never once kind of did the whole, like you said, what are you doing that for? Get a proper job. Not that conversation. So I was allowed to explore, and I think just through that, it made me more determined to be like, well, these people have put faith in me to do my best at this. So I'm going to do the absolute best I can. Modicum of success with bands outside of college and stuff like that, and bands outside of my own stuff. And I've played many places and played around, Europe and stuff, and met some amazing people that are still lifelong friends to this day. And again, if the job of music went away tomorrow, it's like, fine, I'd go get a regular job, but I met all these people and I learned all this cool stuff, and nothing is a loss. Not one part of this is a loss. I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for music.
And that would be awful for you.
It would. Yeah. So everybody I know is pretty much through music. And again, it's what, like you said, what people, apart from the beard, what people probably know most about me. It's like, oh, him again. I've seen him in about 44 bands this year. Like, he's just everywhere. But I can't help it. It's like I say, it's compulsion. I can't not do it. It's a shark swimming in water. I've got to keep swimming, otherwise, I die. So,
totally. Would you still recommend? I mean, I feel like you have to recommend for people to go to university to study music, but do you feel like that's a good recommendation?
I don't think there's anything wrong with trying. I mean, some people are cut out for it, some people aren't. I mean, I wasn't the best student, but in terms of grades and things like that, but I tried really hard with practicing and playing and learning my instrument and instruments. I gave up a lot of social life to sit in my room and be a dork and read drum charts for 4 or 5 hours a day and do nothing but read drum music and study music. And I'd like to think in a small part it's paid off. But I would recommend it. As we record this now, the world is still on fire. It's coming close to being put out, but the world's falling apart. So what is a year, 2 years of your life just to discover maybe not even a skill, but just something about yourself? Like either you can or can't do this, and then you can take that ethos into the workplace, or maybe you find a friend that would help you out and put you in a position, or maybe you can help someone up to your level. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, again, the teacher in me is like, go to college, come talk to me about it. Let's get you on the course. The realistic person in me going, why the hell not? What have you got to lose by trying a year, trying to, in your circumstance as well, what have you got to lose by doing a course in something that you're interested in? You will probably learn something. And even if you didn't, well, you might have had a good time.
Well, is there a large difference between teacher, Richard, and not teacher? Kind of just somebody who enjoys music, the non-professional you? Is there a big difference between those two versions?
I swear a little less as teacher Richard. No, again, we've already spoke about this in me being quite nervous about doing something like this. I don't live in my head. I don't think too much about things. Obviously, I have teachings in my head through doing courses and degrees and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes into the classroom, I try and be quite realistic, and I try and be quite relatable and say, look, this is kind of what you're going to potentially be doing. You're going to be playing in dive bars to 3 people. So, let's focus on doing that well. And then we can look at, what it's like to play in a stadium. If any of us ever get there, me included, I've never done anything like that. So the realism's still there. I don't necessarily put on a suit and tie and become this whole corporate person. That's not what I do. What any of us really do, and I think that's what's quite good about potentially going to college now or going to an establishment now is the whole idea of a teacher is completely different from when we were younger. The idea that I would see one of my teachers outside of school was mortifying in like the supermarket. I bumped into half of my students at gigs, at band practices and stuff, and it's not a thing anymore. It's just like, yeah, I'm here, same as you. I'm trying to reach the same thing you are. I'm just, albeit 20 odd years in front of you.
Yeah, is that a good thing?
I think so. I think the one thing I've always tried to look at is everything I say is realistic, or everything I've done, I've lived. So I'm not going to feed you some story or some learning about something I ain't got a clue about. I'll leave that to someone who knows more than I do. But what I will teach you about is stuff that I've kind of been there and done that. So it's not out of a book. It's not someone else's opinion. It's what I've lived, and hopefully that believability comes across. And even if it's not like the best advice, it's like, well, it's the most realistic advice. So it's steered me right so far. So I don't really see a reason why it should change anytime soon.
Yeah, it's those two different kinds of, I suppose, their values when it comes to what you want from a person in authority, in any authority at all. Is on the one hand, you want them to have the theory. You want them to be able to write a book about the thing that they've done, I suppose, and explain it. But you also want the experience. You want them to have experienced it as well, so you know that they're talking. I don't know, there's some kind of verification I would feel from that. If somebody was just a theorist and they'd just read a book about, I don't know, how to do the thing they're trying to tell me to do, I don't feel like I would have the same degree of trust in them that I would had they experienced it for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it always goes back to that old slogan that used to annoy me, like, those that can do, those that can't teach. Like, no, those that can't just are there to help you make sure that you can in future. Or, I mean, the word can't is irrelevant. It's the wrong word. But yeah, those who can do, like I was an active musician, still am. But then I realized that I could probably make a bit of a difference in the younger generation's life by going, all this stuff of how the music industry worked then don't work like that anymore. Like, you need to get a YouTube channel, or you need to be on Spotify, or you need to be on Twitch or something. That's not in a textbook from 5 years ago, because it wasn't a thing. There's talk about A&R agents, like they're still walking around pubs and will come. Like, music venues are, unfortunately, again, as we sit here, are still closing every day and stuff. So how do you get your music scene? Well, YouTube's a big thing. I don't want to talk, I don't necessarily want to talk about it because I don't understand it too much, but it is the thing. So yeah, again, those I can't do, those I can do, those I can't teach. Like, no, you just have to be clever enough to go, I understand my role as a teacher. I've got the theory. I can teach you how to do this, but what they're not going to teach you is what I had to learn the hard way, and that's what I'm giving you. That's what I'm going to kind of pass on to you. So hopefully you don't make the same mistakes, or if you do, you learn quicker than I did.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's a misconception there, or a strange expectation for what you get from university. It's like, I like to think that I never went there thinking that me going to study and get a degree in music would ever lead to me playing in an arena or anything like that. That was never what I was there for. It's like, that would have been nice, surely, to be successful for the music that I'd written would be lovely. But it was always, I don't know, my expectations were always that, well, I'm just going to develop my craft, really, and make it more likely that I get to those sorts of, those higher planes by being better at my instrument, or having more experience playing with other musicians, or having a better grasp of theory, and so on and so forth. Do people come in with that unhealthy expectation still? Is that a thing?
Not as much now. I mean, when things like X Factor and that were at the highest, you would get people who saw this over-glamorized idea of what being a musician or being in the music industry was. And one of the first things I always say to my students is, look, I'm not in the business of breaking dreams, but if you want to be a rock star, just realize that I might not be the person to make that happen, but what I will teach you could eventually maybe put you on the path to do that externally. And I always say to them, because they always come in as a guitarist or a drummer or something, and I'll say, right, well, I'll probably, I can't make you a better drummer, but I will make you a better musician, and you'll just be a musician that happens to, happens to squeeze your music out as a drummer, or happens to push it through, funnel it through as a guitar player, but you'll be a better musician. And as we've learned from this day and age, and again, I don't want to keep talking about the times we are in now, but as we are in a position where live venues are still fairly closed and a lot of bands can't really do what they've trained to do, everybody's gone to a different working method. Everyone's gone to online streaming concerts, green screening, quarantine sessions, lockdown sessions. And I would probably say that I'm quite confident that a lot of the students I've taught would have been somewhat prepared. I mean, we didn't talk about it explicitly, but somewhat prepared of like, right, well, if your live music revenue goes, what else can you do? Well, we've done songwriting. I'm pretty good on a DAW, on Cubase or Logic or something. I'm pretty good at recording. We actually teach a podcast unit because before all this, we saw the growing trend in podcasts as it was. So we do a podcast unit so that they understand how to even just do a basic one on the phone. Whether they put that into practice, that's down to them. But they're equipped with the skills to actually manage being a musician now when that live music aspect has gone. So yeah, I try and be realistic with them and say, look, rock star is one thing, but what is a rock star these days? What the hell does that even mean? Playing Wembley Stadium is a good measurement, but also a kid on SoundCloud that's got 1,000 followers but does it in his bedroom with the most limited material and gear you've ever seen, that's pretty successful to me as well.
Yeah, what do you think are the kind of the critical components of somebody who makes a good student, or not just a good student, but you use the word like a better musician? What is it that kind of gets you there? I suppose I could get you started, like, because my first thought when you were speaking about that was it was something to do with adaptability to circumstances. I think you've got to be quick not necessarily quick, but you've just got to be willing to adapt. If things change and circumstances present themselves drastically different, you've got to be willing to see the new opportunities and take them rather than resist them. So I think the people who will do well in whatever world we find ourselves in post-COVID will be the ones who've adapted the most to that world, and the ones who aren't successful, the ones who are just still trying to make music from touring, for example, or any of these things that at the moment are really hard to monetize. That's at least one thing. Maybe you've got other things to add to that particular thing, or maybe there's just other things.
Only one other thing that, again, I always say to the students, there's two things. It's always, you've got to have a fire in your belly. I can't start the fire, but I can fan the flames. I can grow it bigger if it's already there. If you don't have a fire in your belly to kind of drive yourself to do something, or to learn, then it's kind of tough. And then curiosity. I mean, how many times have we just wanted to answer a question, and then in finding the answer to that question, we've found 40 other questions we didn't even know existed, and then have to find the answer to that out. So I mean, with my musical projects at the minute, just again mainly through lockdown, but I've been doing a lot of it through the laptop, and there's just stuff I just did not know how to do before all this, and then go on one YouTube tutorial of how to do something in bloody Logic. And then, and then the algorithm kicks in. It's like, there's another one now of like how to do this in Step Editor, or how to create a Billie Eilish type beat, and you end up kind of watching them. And again, my curiosity has meant that I just learn all this stuff, some of it irrelevant. I've been trying to learn video editing just for no reason other than I was like, I wonder how you do this. And I wonder if there's anything about this that I could show the students quickly, something on iMovie, or how to cut a film together on the phone. So if we are in a situation where we're quarantined or locked down again, or just technology is less available, or they can't get out, then you can do stuff at home. But they've got to be curious, and they've got to have that passion and drive. And without that, there's not really much I can do. There have been students in the past where you've got them there. There might be, it might not be great players, but as long as they're willing and determined and passionate, then it's pretty easy to point them in the right path.
Yeah, I was kind of Googling there because I couldn't remember it off the top of my head, but there's an Einstein quote about curiosity. I'll read it. It says, "I am neither clever nor especially gifted. I'm only very, very curious." That's Albert Einstein. I knew he said something about curiosity, but I totally agree. I think that's one of the things that's led me practically everywhere I've been in terms of creative pursuits. Music, I got there because I was just curious about something, didn't even really know what, still don't. But philosophy is the same thing. I just became very curious about, I didn't use those words. I used the words that were more almost meditative, because it was to do with gratitude. And I said I stopped taking everything for granted. So even just down to basic things like, why is the sky blue? And it's an easy one, but I was like, I didn't just take it for granted that it is blue and that it just is. And I started being curious because of that like lack of carelessness, and I was more grateful for things, I guess. So I wasn't taking things for granted, and just became very curious about everything. And then here we are, maybe about 5 years later since I started kind of taking that term, and at the end of a philosophy course. And I never would have predicted that from me on a music degree nearly 10 years ago. Never.
It's bonkers. I've got a 6-year-old at the minute, so she's full of questions, and it's very easy to say, I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that. But every now and then, like, oh, Dad, why are the clouds a certain way? And I'm like, right, let's have a look. And then that's it. We went into a rabbit hole of like I don't even know them, but the names of different types of shapes of clouds and stuff. I'm going, what the hell? But that was just a curious nature, and I can't switch it off. So as soon as she mentioned, I only really bring it up because she said sky is blue. So she asked me, why is the sky blue? And I thought I had a pretty good answer for her. And then I Googled it, and I went, it's completely wrong. So like, right, so why is the sky blue? Right, well, it's all to do with the light and reflections. It's like, why? Okay. And then you just find out that an hour's gone and she's downstairs playing outside on a trampoline, and I'm still on Google going, yeah, but what? But again, it's both a blessing and a curse to be quite curious, because it takes up a lot of my time, but I've learned a lot because of it.
Yeah, do you feel like you have to have some kind of barometer for what's worth exploring and what's worth just forgetting about?
I mean, I should find some safe word for when it's getting a bit too rough. But I mean, last couple of nights it's just been doing something. It could be watching something on YouTube, but then I realise that I'm sat in the dark and it's just time's passed away and I haven't switched the light on. And I'm just going, oh crap, 2 hours have passed and it's dark outside now and I've not locked my door and my curtains are up. And it's like, I should probably put the laptop down now and, go do something more productive.
Yeah, I think it is a useful skill though, especially in creativity, to just be completely open-minded to things. Because, I mean, as you said earlier, you don't necessarily know those things will ever be useful, but they might be. And so I always just kind of think the same you said about video editing. It seems unlikely to me that won't be useful.
I mean, it's not something that I know I need at the minute. It's only something that I learned how to do and then just used it because I could. I never needed to learn how to do it because, again, I surround myself with people that are way better at a lot of the stuff that I can do and also just brilliant at the stuff I can't as well. So if I ever needed photography or video editing, I'd just usually a friend of a friend or, I'm not too far away from someone that could just do that for me or with me.
Yeah, well, but that kind of brings us to something else I'd wanted to speak about, which is the difference between kind of working on your own or collaborating with other people. Do you feel like in collaboration they kind of shape you to some degree, like brings out different parts of Rich the creative?
It can do. I mean, given the choice, I would much rather work with other people all the time. It's only the last project I've done that, even though it's been me and my friend Kylie, a lot of the music has been me just sat at a computer creating. It's not been a bad process, but I'd still prefer to work with a band, definitely. It was funny because when you did the one with Ben, Turning Tides, obviously my first little shout out, I got mentioned in that one because I used to play in a band with Ben. And when he was talking about, I mean, he's quite opposite, I found out, which again was a nice thing to find out about Ben, that what I thought he quite liked the band aspect. There was a little part of him that was kind of like, the compromise wasn't, he didn't want to do this, and having him and Josh in the band as brothers, like the Gallagher bloody brothers, I would just kind of sat back a lot going, I don't know what to do, which could have come across as not caring or anything, which it wasn't at all. It was a strange dynamic, that band, but one of the best bands I've ever been in. And then every other band since, it's always been, I like working with people. I like people to call me out on stuff that's not quite right, and I like people to take my ideas and do better things with them. And I am terrible with like lyrics, and I can write a guitar melody or a piano melody or a string melody, but I cannot do vocal melody. Just, it is not in my wheelhouse, no matter how much I've tried to learn, which is perfect because when you work with someone like Kylie, she makes it look easy. And when I've worked in the past with people like Ben and other people, so I would always prefer to work with other people. I love collabing. I love compromising. I love just talking about stuff and getting it wrong and trying 14 different ideas to find the one that sticks. When I'm sat by myself, it's like I don't have the discipline. Well, I'll give you an example. I messed about with a synth plugin yesterday, an hour and a half. I must have gone through 400 presets just trying to find the sound. Well, I know if someone was sat next to me that had called me 5 minutes in and gone, "You're being ridiculous now," that one was fine. I think I actually went back and chose the third one I ever listened to. I'm not good. I'm not good with again, like you said, with the whole kind of setting yourself a barometer or setting yourself a point where do you stop. I'm not good at that on my own. I go on too much. As you can tell from how I'm talking now, I don't know when to stop. But
I would only add a question, which is, do you think that self-awareness is one of those critical components for good creative then? I mean, I don't know if you'd describe yourself as somebody who's particularly self-aware or not. You said you don't spend much time in your head, but the things that you're saying sound like somebody who knows themselves quite well.
It's only through, to be honest with you, it's only through kind of doing a bit of research for this that I kind of sat down and thought, right, well, why do I necessarily do the things I do? Or why do I think the way I think? Because it's all on impulse. Again, the reason I've been in 600 bloody bands is because I just want to say yes and like, yeah, I need a bass player. Well, I can't play a bass, but I'll learn how because I just want to jam with you guys because you're cool people. Or I need a piano player or something. Well, I'm all right at piano, but I'll do it for you. So I am self-aware, and I do know what qualities I have that would be good to other people. And you know, it would be very naive. Although I want to remain humble and have some humility, it would be very naive to think that people don't. You know, when people ask me to be in their band, it's not because we're just friends. It's because they know I would do something particular that they want, or there's something I could bring to that table that maybe someone else couldn't. So I am self-aware, but I'm not self-assured. Like I don't trust my instincts too much, and I need constant affirmation from people to go, yep, you're doing well, that's good. Oh, I really like that part. Because it's not a self-esteem. Well, I guess it's a bit of a self-esteem thing, but I'm just like, I don't do a lot of this stuff, so therefore, I know I could play drums in your band, and it's fine. I'm confident with that. But some of the other stuff, like songwriting, which I'm very new to, and doing my own music, which I'm very, very new to, I'm very insecure about. So I need someone to kind of give me a hug and tell me everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for people. You know, you hear like Prince, who could just produce his own records as well as having written them all and performed every instrument on it. I mean, hard to not respect all of that. And you almost grow up as a musician trying to emulate that and going, yeah, I can do all of that. I can do that too. And I've done each of those things independently of one another. Like I can produce a record and it sound decent. Like I can do that. Or I should say I could. I used to be able to. I haven't done that for years, so who knows if I still could. But I can produce a record. I can play instruments to some degree of quality. I can play them all right. I can sing okay. I can write music well. Like I think that's one thing I'm pretty good at, writing music. But putting them all together, and it's just me. If I'm trying to produce my own music, it never works. It just doesn't. It never feels right. And I don't know if there's just a thing of it being essential. Like I need to have myself checked at some point, so I'm just not taking a bad road. I mean, I hear this all the time about musicians who at some point in their career, usually, you know, third, fourth album territory, decide to self-produce their own record, and those records never seem to be the better ones, or very rarely seem to be the better ones that they do. They seem to lose something, and so that's why I have my music produced by somebody else now. You know, I've been working with the same guy in all the records that I've made as Arthur Dove, and they're so much better. Like the moment I take the songs at some stage to him and we work on them and shape them together, but the things he does, I just wouldn't have thought of because he's just wired a different way to me. So like the ideas he have he's much more poppy than I am. So he takes these bonkers ideas sometimes that are quite abstract and unusual and turns it into a pop song, whereas if I'd been left to my own devices, nobody would have been able to follow it. It was just a bit too out there, I guess. I suppose I'm self-therapizing now, but where do you fit in all that? Like, how do you fit? Like, what's your home instrument is the drums, I would say. Is that fair?
I mean, guitar was the first thing I learned, just mainly because trying to convince parents at 13, 14 to get a drum kit was just a no-go. So, you know, like everyone, just a dodgy one bought from market with probably 3 strings missing, trying to play P by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Oh, no, My Friends by Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then again, a band, some friends at school wanted to make a band. They already had a guitarist. They said, can you play drums? I'm like, I ain't got a clue, but I'll sit down and I'll try. And then I found that drums is the only instrument to me that's been a little bit more natural. Like I just took to it a little easier than everything else. Guitar was a slog in the early years, as was bass. I mean, playing bass well. I know a lot of guitarists can play bass, but trying to learn some of the more bass-centric techniques and piano was quite difficult to get the hang of initially. I've been trying to teach myself saxophone for the last 2 or 3 years. I play 2 Christmas songs on it. That's about as well as I've got. So So yeah, guitar first, and then everything kind of came after that. But drums is probably the thing I play the most in bands. Although I have done guitar and keys and bass and vocals in bands before. It's the one thing that I think I don't do better, but I think I have a unique playing style with drums, where guitar I don't necessarily think I do. I'm not, crapping on myself. It's just I don't put a lot of effort into playing the guitar. I usually just jam along to my favorite tracks and albums. So I haven't had the chance to be, apart from what I'm doing now with KMRS, to be quite creative with the guitar. So yeah, and going back to what you said about self-producing, if I did this again, I don't think I'd self-produce. It's just too much. My little brain can't comprehend everything. And Kylie's brilliant because I'll send her a track and she won't, that synth that I've been meticulously going through presets looking at, she doesn't necessarily care about that, and not in a bad way, but she'll just like, oh mate, that's brilliant. And she looks at the overall picture where I look at that little, have you heard that hi-hat? It's slightly louder. She's like, hey, it sounds brilliant. I need someone that's very level-headed. So, and just like I said, looks at the big picture, or maybe just can steer me in a different direction. I don't think I'd ever self-produce again. I don't know how people do this. I really don't.
I think I don't. It's one of those things, like I've spoken about it on quite a few of the podcasts now, to do with like the brain hemispheres and things like that. But you could just as easily divide it into like what you've described as being impulsive, or like intuitions and intellect on the other side of it. And I think if you're trying to do all of it yourself, you're endlessly trying to shuffle things from one side of your brain or one side of you to another and back, and just repeating that process over and over again. And it's just so much easier to just have somebody else to fulfill that role, and you just to sit and be impulsive, and for somebody else to be the rational, or somebody else to care about the minor details, and somebody else to care about the bigger whole. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, definitely. It's again, I don't begrudge having to learn the hard way, because I've learned a lot of things that I would and wouldn't do again. And I know I know plenty of people that self-produce, and they've just mastered, like I said, they've just mastered that idea of it's not a devil on each shoulder, one that's bad and one that's good. You've got about 50 around you, and they're all telling you contradicting things, and you don't know who to listen to, or you focus on one and you forget about the other, where you just want someone to kind of just flick all the devils off your shoulder and go, I'm the voice of reason, I'm the voice of God, and I'm saying it's this. And again, if that's a person you trust, then it probably helped with workflow as well. I mean, I've re-recorded these songs steadily over the past 4 years. We did his first song about 4 years ago, and I think it's been through 2 iterations, and it would have been out earlier, but with lockdown and everything, we couldn't get together, so we couldn't record as much. So we've been doing that in lockdown. Kylie sending me tracks through a vocal and me putting them in, and then me bouncing stuff back and forth, which is brilliant. And I'm glad we have the facility to work that way. But it's not as good as just having someone sat next to you, was change that, do that, do that. The process has been...
It's slower, I think. I noticed the same kind of thing. Even with conversations like this is a degree worse than doing it in person, but it's a degree better than doing it just over the phone.
Yeah, or not doing it at all.
Or not doing it at all. Yes, it's quite a few degrees better than not doing it at all. But like the better conversations are always the ones where you're in the same room with them, because there's something about the energy of being in the room with the person that, I don't know, it shapes it's almost as if being in the room with another person means that the conversation just feels more shared, if that makes sense. It feels like there's less. I mean, this probably sounds a bit abstract and a bit woo-woo, but it just feels like there's no distance between. It's almost as if, like, if we were in the room having a conversation, there is no Darren and Rich as like two separate things. There's just the conversation. Do you get what I mean there? Because I know I'm being it's a bit hippie, but this is kind of how I look at a good conversation. Is like I'm trying my best to do them and make the most of the world that we have now by doing it online. But in a room, you can almost you are feeding off one another on more than one level a lot easier, because it's not just words and intellect. It's like there's something just there that the feeling of the person you can kind of connect with more.
No,
I guess
completely. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's no way we could do it, but if we somehow were in parallel worlds and we could have a conversation in person and one, via the computer and record them, they would be completely different. Even though you may have an agenda of what you want to do and say, I might have gone in a different path. You know, something in your room might have sparked conversation, something in my room would have sparked conversation. And, you know, everything becomes different. And especially because, again, of lockdown and stuff, just that human connection. This for me, even though this is good, and I'm glad I get to talk to you, but amount of people I've spoke to over my computer in the last 6-7 months, and then when I see them in person, and even though I'm not allowed, you know, just want to give them the biggest hug in the world and just want that kind of human connection. This feels very normal now, and it shouldn't. But yeah, it would definitely be better in person.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing of writing music. Is it would be better in person. I've seen people who've adapted in the same way that you have, and they've made records by one person being at one laptop in one part of the world and hitting the record button, like presumably through like TeamViewer or some kind of remote control, and recording the other person in the studio at the other side of the country. And that's great, but I just feel like something is lost there. I mean, this actually evokes this memory for me of when I had the recording studio. I used to always, I guess because I was always taught, you had the performer behind the glass and you on the other side, and you pressed buttons and you spoke to them through an intercom that fed into their headphones, and that was how you did things. And as my career, in air quotes, as my career progressed, I became a bit disenfranchised with that, and I preferred to have the person in the room with me all the time. Didn't matter what they were doing, whether they were singing. I mean, the only way I didn't was if it was drums, because it was just too noisy and too difficult. But every other thing, I preferred them sitting right in front of me, where we were just. I mean, I can't explain it. I don't know what it was there, but there was just some. I suppose people would use the word like chemistry. Like there was an affect that was different, and you can't get that digitally. You can't get that over the internet. I mean, if you experience that same kind of thing, am I talking to somebody who kind of knows and sympathizes with what I mean, or am I just in the clouds here?
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I mean, even the recording studio thing you mentioned. Obviously, most of the recordings I've done has been a drummer, so I've had to have that, you know, that glass between the producer. But I've done a bit of producing for a couple of friends at Chris Barron, who we both know. I've been helping him out with some tracks and stuff, and it's my bedroom, but I much prefer to have them there next to me. So then it's a shared experience. We're both reaching the same goal. When it's just I always just watch documentaries of producers, even though Rick Rubin's like just this like famous producer who's done all this kind of stuff. I can't remember who he was working with, but he was like, right, I'm off. I'll come back in a week. I don't know if it was Metallica, which is why that Metallica album came out a bit meh, or somebody. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going, and then I'll come back. I don't think he's done that with all of them, but I just like if someone's producing, I need them there to along the way and know that what they're trying to get me to is the same place I want to be. But they're just, you know, they just got the reins. They're just steering the car, but I'm driving it. And yeah, you know, like I say, chemistry is a big thing. Otherwise, what's the point in doing any of it really? I mean, again, for me, if there's no chemistry there, I'm just left to my own devices, and it's not a nice place to be, because it's all second guessing and everything.
Yeah, I guess I wonder if it is like returning to the old analogy we said, it like kind of it's that pluralism, and you have that like the two hemispheres, or you have your intuitions and you have your intellect, and there's like you've got to have them both balanced. And we said that, well, it's nice to have an extra person, because it's like you can have that pluralism divided with each person almost. So you can have the one person whose role of it is to just have intuitions, and the other person is to intellectualize a lot of it. And that might be or to concentrate on the finer details, perhaps would be a better way of saying that. But if those two people are spread far apart and put in other rooms or on other sides of the country, that then is akin to putting, you know, the two hemispheres at the other side of the country, and it just feels off. It feels like lacking. And it's like there's some kind of, I mean, this is the first time I've really thought about it, but I feel like there's some sense of unity. There's something like unifying and wholesome about a good collaboration, because it's like everybody's bringing out the best elements of each other, also at the right times, continuously. This is genuinely the first time I've thought about this. I haven't, you know, I used to be in bands for all of the music that I'd written, That was all I ever did, and it was everything I wrote was just for a band, and there were ideas that I had that never made it to that. But I'm finding as I get older that actually my best work is always when it's collaborated to some degree. I have to kind of get that balance right. I can't just go all in on collaboration because it just doesn't. When I was in bands and I was just doing everything for a band, it didn't quite work because for various reasons. Whereas now I'm technically a solo performer, or with the Tea Company, it's mostly just me. But I know when to collaborate. I know when to say, okay, at this point my skills are not good enough. I need somebody else. Or at this point, like, I know where I'm stuck and I know when it's going to happen. Do you think you can train that skill as well? Is that a skill that just, I feel like that's something I've learned. Do you feel like you can train that?
Yeah, I don't think it's as black and white as having it or not or training, because I think it rests on a lot of other personality traits you have, whether you are someone that is communicative, whether you are someone that will or can compromise, whether you are someone that does like a shared experience or is too precious, or, again, these words we brought up before, self-conscious, insecure. I do think you can train it. Again, I've always been that way. Any music I've made has always been a shared experience, for better or for worse. Again, you hear all these bands that hated each other, that were on drugs, but they still made this great album. It's like, because when they needed to collaborate, they did. And whether it be Fleetwood Mac or Guns N' Roses or whoever else, so there is always room for collaboration, no matter where the ideas come from, or who's got the ideas. And if you're the only if you're the only person behind the driving force behind the band, I could imagine that is quite a lonely territory to be in, because people would just get very, it's fine, that's fine, a bit dismissive and not really care too much about it. Where when people are bringing things to the table, then hopefully it makes you realise that you don't have to be precious, or, again, like you said, trust that someone else can do the job better than you. So why wouldn't you utilise that skill? Why wouldn't you say to that person, you are far better at playing drums than me? And I've been in bands with people who are drummers, and it took a while to learn to kind of go, right, they're the drummer, not me. I can't think about that drummer. I can't tell that drummer what to do per se. I would do it differently, but I'm not the drummer, so walk away. And thankfully, almost every band I've been in since one of my first ones, I've been able to trust the drummer and been able to work with that person and go, like, you're doing a good job. And I'm reassured, they're reassured, and there's not any kind of weird tension. Which, again, when I'm making my own music, I'm trying to think like what a guitarist would do in this bit, what a bass player would do in this bit, what a drummer would do in this bit, and I'd spend that much time trying to make people happy, like you would even if you were just the only person bringing ideas to a table in a band, that you just end up resenting it. I can't really resent myself because that doesn't work, but I can resent the music a bit and go, oh, I wish I had someone who just could play the bloody bass line. So I do think you can train up to it, but again, it's all from experience. You have to put yourself in those positions to be able to learn from them, and if you don't, then you won't develop that skill at all.
Yeah, I remember being a bit of a tyrant when I was in a band. Again, this is probably, I forget which band it was. This is back when I was in a band called Default Method. So this was in the college years. But I was a bit of a tyrant. I was probably fairly unpleasant as well to be in a band with, because I would write a song and just go, here it is, play that. And I would have it very kind of firmly locked in my mind. And I think and look back on that as a form of arrogance. Like, it was as if I knew better than everybody else how to play their instruments, even though I couldn't play their instruments. So it's like an unusual kind of dictatorship where it's like, hey, I don't know what to do or how to do what you're doing, but I'll know it when I hear it, and then just endlessly criticizing the things that they do wrong without any kind of guidance as to how to do it better. It just seemed, I mean, maybe I'm being unfair on myself, but looking back, it seemed to me like it was just that kind of came from arrogance or mistrust of anybody else being able to do anything competent. It was only me. I kind of don't look back on that attitude very fondly at all. I think it was just a bit stupid, to be honest. But
yeah, I mean, I have been in bands where the music's recorded and they just want me to go in and play exactly what's there, and I love that. I absolutely adore that. As much as I like being creative, as much as I like arranging and doing stuff, I played with Ben as well. I played in a Pearl Jam tribute band, and I I was a bit. That's the only band I would consider myself close to being a tyrant. Because if it wasn't like the studio version, if that guitar line wasn't right, then I'd be like, "What are you doing?" They play it on this, or looking at the drummer when they did a fill. It's like that's not the fill on the record, or stuff like that. Which again, I don't know why I do that, because I guess it's because I'm still, to this day, I'm still that kid who puts a guitar on, puts an album on, and stands in my room and pretends I'm playing to a crowd, like I did with my cardboard guitar when I was 12. But now I fortunately I can do it with a real guitar and just turn my amp up and blast the music out, and just do the whole a teenager in your room just when you learn to play guitar. So I do like doing things by the book, and I like playing stuff accurately. Again, a conversation you had with Ad when we talk about covering, making covers your own. I think there's a time and place for that, definitely. But with like cover band stuff, I love doing, because that's a challenge to me, doing the exact same fill that person did, or doing that exact same solo that person did, or bass run or riff or whatever. That's where I find a lot of enjoyment learning things to the letter. But
I guess in that case, it would be fairly remiss of me, and maybe people would be upset with me if I didn't mention Guess the Riff. So, I mean, do you want to tell people about what Guess the Riff was for any listeners who don't know?
I mean, it's silly in a way, because it's nothing really. Like, it was purely, I'm in a band called Trancend, with three really good friends, and we do a lot of recording at home. So I tend to record a lot of the track, because I have the facility to record guitars, bass, and everything. Kylie will do the vocals, and then the musicians will learn it. So we had a couple of tracks coming out. Lockdown happened, and I said, right, everyone's doing these quarantine videos where they're just kind of playing along to the track in the bedroom. And I just needed to learn how to edit videos. Simple as that. I just needed to learn how to use iMovie. And I thought, well, what could I do? And I was like, well, I sit here and I just jam along to tracks anyway. So I know a lot of riffs. And I thought, well, instead of just doing a video edit of something that wouldn't be out there, or that wouldn't, anyone wouldn't see, I thought, well, let's do something like this. Stupid. I just thought, I'd just play some riffs, do a little, almost like, never mind the Buzzcocks, like guess the song kind of idea. That's kind of what was in my head, although it was actually played with the proper instruments and everything. And I mean, even if you look at when I posted the first Guess the Riff video up, I'm getting used to iMovie. If anyone can give me any comments or any suggestions of how to do a better edit, that was it. I didn't say focus on the music or look how good that drum beat is or the production elements. I need to get better at iMovie. And then the second one, again, I needed a few vids, but you'll see the production value and the video editing gets, I wouldn't say better, but it gets more adventurous either time. So like having split screen and then having things moving. And it was purely that. But thankfully, I think because we were in lockdown and people were maybe on the phones a little bit more, there was a lot of engagement from it, and a lot of friends who I hadn't spoken to in a while leaving comments and going, I remember that song and remember that riff. And people just engaging and talking with me. Got me in touch with a really old friend of mine called Dill, who was doing a similar thing, recording his own music and putting it online. So we collaborated on a track, and so that opened the doors to him. And another friend of mine, Michael Burke, we've always been in touch, but talked about collaborating with him on some stuff. So a silly little idea that was just basically trying to get good with video editing and trying to put in what I'd learned about production as well, and making and mixing and mastering. Just I thought, a little project to put it all together. Wasn't supposed to be a thing. Ended up doing 7 of them. There's only 6 available online because the 6th one deleted, and I can't be bothered doing it again. So the songs will end up in number 8 if I do one. And the engagement's gone down as people return to work, but it's not. Like a lot of the stuff I do, I'm so thankful that people enjoy it. But I do it. I selfishly, I do it because I want to. And if people like it, brilliant. If people engage with it, amazing. I couldn't ask for it better than that. But I do it because I want to, and because I have that compulsion to do something. And thankfully, a lot of the stuff I've done over the years, people feel quite fondly about, whether it's music, song, bands. So yeah.
Well, the reason I brought Guess the Riff up especially is because my impression from that was your ear must be particularly tuned to something that I'm not. I mean, you just seem to capture like the original sounds of the instruments as well as the parts and the playing of them quite closely.
Yeah.
Is that like how do you do that?
Well, that's the aspect I said of kind of sitting in my room and just learning songs, and again, we grew up in the days before kind of being able to get tabs and things like that. If I could afford to save up to go towards music in Wakefield and buy a guitar book, I would, but they're like 20, 25 quid. I'd bring it back and I just get bored of learning. So everything, even to this day, I might check out tabs if I'm unsure, but even the world of tabs they're hardly ever right. There's 1 out of 50 that might be. So it's purely just through sitting and listening. I would, if I could list a strength, it would definitely be ear, which is why I was such a tyrant in cover bands, because I would hear something in the recording that they weren't playing, and I'm like, but it's in there, and we'd argue like, no, it ain't, and I'd play it to them, and then you might have to like proper crush the headphones next to your ears, and like it's there, like, oh yeah, you're right. And that, again, that's just I just can't. If I hear something, it has to be replicated. So and it's only till recently that I've actually got electric drum kits, so all the drums were finger drums. So I was like the one hand was playing the kick and snare, and the other hand was playing the hi-hat, and I was trying to get these drum beats like Limp Bizkit like accurately. And you go back now and listen, and they're not as good as the ones now because I can actually physically play them through the electric kit. But again, it's a compulsion stuff. I don't know why I do it. I just have to do it. When someone listens to a Deftones riff, it's like, that's the drum beat, that's the bass line. That's as close as I could get to the guitar sound without having all the gear available to me. I don't have that much in terms of equipment. Like I only have a couple of guitars. So if it's a Fender type guitar, then it has to be played on a Fender. It's so anal. It really is. It's not a good thing.
No, I think from the point of view of education though and learning, it's like you've got to be a bit of a chameleon to be able to play as somebody else, because that is one of the things you have to be doing there, I would argue.
Yeah, and again, never been a conscious thought as such, but I've missed my calling for covers bands now, really, because there's not that many about. But I seem to be very good at replicating other people's sound, which is why when it came time for me writing my own music, I was like, I just don't know how to do this, because I don't want to be going through ripping other people off, because all I know is how to play guitar like that person and how to play drums like that person or people. So yeah, it is a skill in some respects, but it's also a curse in some. Given students, like, you need to play like that. Like, well, I can't. I'm like, oh, it doesn't sound right, and it just irks me. Like, I'm a rubbish speller, so I can tell when I send an email to someone and I just see that I'm using there, or there wrong, and just how some people might get really angry about use of grammar. I get really angry, not angry, but I get really kind of tyranty about people not playing stuff right. I can't go see cover bands anymore. I can't do it. Spoilt it for me.
I was like that for a little while with sound engineering when I was doing that professionally. If I was going to a gig, I'd just become a critique of the live sound. To a degree with records as well. I'm kind of past that now, having not done that for a while either. In any case, I think that kind of draws the podcast to a nice close, and I've had you for a bit of time, so very grateful for your time. Where can people find some of these things online? So Guess the Riff, any of the bands and so on?
I can't remember. Well, KMRS is probably the most active band. That's the one. We've got an album coming out, hopefully end of October, early November. Should have been out earlier, but lockdown prevented all that. So you could go to kmrsmusic.co.uk, kmrsmusic.co.uk. That will be updated regularly. But there's some music on there you can find, and that will link you to the YouTube, SoundCloud, all that kind of stuff. I'm also in a band called Trancend, where we do like rock and metal covers of 90s and 2000s trance dance classics like Scooter and Barbie Girl, and I'm trying to think, Cascada and Tokka's Miracle and all that kind of stuff. So that's Trancend Band UK. It's Trancend spelled trance, Trancend. So like trance is in the style of music, not as in the actual word for transcend. But YouTube, I think it's just Richard Swift, but there is an American singer-songwriter called Richard Swift, so I might be about 14th on the list because there's only about videos on there, and it's not important in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, just Richard Swift on YouTube. Check it out. It's all a bit of fun.
I'll stick links in the bio for this as well, because I think hearing the Guess the Riff will probably just kind of help to hearing it will illustrate it better than our speaking about it in some cases. Kind of what we've been talking about.
There's quite a few riffs that people still haven't got yet. So just
well, there you go. Let's kind of complete the set in that case.
Do it all.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Always, mate. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well.